Good morning, good evening, whatever time of day it is for you. Welcome to this thing that I do called Thor's Entertainment. I am Thor, and today I am finishing up my playthrough of the remaster of the original Crash Bandicoot, which that remaster is available in the Insane Trilogy. So yeah, we are now on episode number 6, having knocked out 5 episodes prior to now, which had me covering every single level in the game with the exception of the final boss. Now that final boss is going to be the main bad guy that was set up at the very beginning of the game back in the very first cutscene. That's going to be drneocortex, the guy that experimented on Crash Bandicoot. And in case you weren't here from the very beginning, the whole idea was that Dr. Neocortex was experimenting on animals in order to turn them into humanoid soldiers, and well, that's how we got Crash. But fortunately for our protagonist, Crash was able to escape. On the downside, whenever he escaped, he left another Bandicoot behind, and that is unacceptable. So this entire time, he has been fighting his way back to the castle where Dr. Cortex is hiding out, and where the experiment took place to begin with. The goal was to reach that castle and then take down Cortex and save the other Bandicoot, and we are very close to accomplishing that. I left off in the last episode with just 2 levels I had to backtrack to in order to get the gems on those levels. But besides that, the only thing we have left to do is fight Dr. Neocortex, the final boss of the game. So yeah, in the meantime, once we get started in this episode, we're going to be going back to 2 different levels, one of which is going to be the Great Gate, and one of which is going to be Jungle Rollers. Both of those levels are levels that we have done previously, but we did not get the gem the first time around due to some additional requirements. We're going to go ahead and get that fixed at the beginning of this episode. And yeah, you're going to notice almost immediately that these levels are very similar to other levels that we have done. And speaking of similar levels, we are now at the Great Gate, and you may be noticing at this point that this is another variation of the Native Fortress level, just a earlier stage version of it. So it has some very similar puzzles, hazards, and enemies, and yeah, it's pretty much the same, just a little bit less headache-inducing. And up to this point, I still have not died in a while. We are now 3 stages in on that non-dying streak, so hopefully we can keep it going here and make that 4 levels where I have not died. Like, I know I've recorded all of this already, but I actually don't remember when the next time is that Crash unfortunately loses a life. Which is going to be kind of hilarious if I actually do end up getting through the rest of the game without dying a single time. Like, I was joking about that earlier, but that would be pretty awesome. Now, I'm pretty confident that at some point Crash does end up dying again in this playthrough, but like I said, I don't remember when it happened, so since I don't really remember it, there is always that slight chance that it does not happen at all. And if that's the case, I may end up just steamrolling the rest of the game. Which is fine, we're pretty close to the end at this point, so even if we do end up having somehow a deathless run for the rest of the game, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to be complaining. We are pretty close to wrapping everything up. And alright, now we have another early level bonus area, which pretty much means there are going to be barely any hazards here, and what ones there are very unlikely to end up causing you to reset this bonus area. And if you do end up having to reset due to a death in a bonus area like this, I mean, crap happens, and it's definitely happened to me, but that would just be very embarrassing for me at this point. So yeah, we go ahead and breeze through this bonus area and then press on back in the main level and just try to get to the gem unlocked extra area. And then we're going to get the last of the boxes that we need, and then we're really going to press on to the very last of the backtracking levels. And just as I was talking about it, we go ahead and approach the gem platform. It takes us over the portal to an extra area, and of course, there is going to be one more spinning log platform puzzle I have to do. We all know at this point just how much I love spinning these logs and trying to climb up them before they just drop me back down to the bottom and having to do it all over again. And of course, just as I say it, it happens, and sure enough, I have to spin the logs one more time. Or at least, I hope it's just one more time. Knowing my luck, I'm going to end up having to do this over and over again for a little while, and then I'm going to be suffering while I do it. And I did not watch this in advance whenever I was going for this commentary. I kind of forgot what happens in this video, and sure enough, I'm right. I do fall again. So yes, I am suffering. And since I recorded this and added to the video, that means you, the viewer, is also going to have to suffer through it as well. Mwahaha. And alright, nope. This is going to be the very first time in this game I have done this, but I am skipping ahead to right where I was before, and specifically skipping ahead to the successful attempt climbing up those rolling logs and getting back to the level where I just died. We are ending the suffering. I'm putting Crash right back where he should have been before he died, and we're going to get to the end of this level. But yeah, after I used the gem platform, there was not a checkpoint box anywhere. So we would have had to have reverted all the way back to the very last checkpoint box I had prior to reaching the gem platform, and then I was going to have to climb up those spinning logs again, and since I skipped ahead, we'll never know, but there was a really good chance that I would end up screwing up these spinning logs again, resulting in me falling all the way back to the left. Oh, I thought I just died again, but I didn't, so we are good. Anyway, resulting in me falling all the way back down to the bottom of that little challenge, and then having to do it all over again, and, well, I'm just not going to make myself or anyone else watch that, so here we are. Alright, I'll just go ahead and quickly check back here in this little hidden passageway, this little walkway behind the wall, and make sure there isn't anything back here that I need to break in order to get the gem. And hopefully it's kind of like what happened in the fortress level where you can walk all the way through this little area back here and then just make it further into the level without having to deal with all the hazards. And then we can jump over the wall at that point and then continue on to the end of the level, having skipped a bunch of the things that can kill Crash. Okay, awesome. There was one box back there that we needed to break, and it was like the fortress level where once we made it all the way down to the very end, there was another point that we could jump over and then progress forward into the level, having skipped a bunch of the stuff that, again, could potentially kill Crash. So yeah, I will take that little shortcut. I love it. Thank you very much, game developers, for giving me that because I need to get out of this level. And I am so paranoid at this point that I may miss one box. And the paranoia was justified because I forgot that I bounced on a box to get back here, so I have to break that thing and then progress through the level so I don't miss the gem. I was so paranoid that I would miss something and then miss out on the gem, and then have to play through the entire level again, that I was willing to take one more lap back there in the hidden passageway walkway area just to make sure. And sure enough, there it was, because man, that would have really sucked. But yeah, I just had to be sure whether or not there was something still in the walkway back there or in the main walkway up here with all the hazards. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything I could potentially break or need to break in order to get the gem. Like, I'm checking it all out. I never want to do this level again. And yeah, I'm really just ragging on this level. It is fun, don't get me wrong, but after a bunch of attempts, being this close to the end, and again, falling so many times on those spinning logs, you just want to be over with eventually, and that's definitely where I'm at this point. And up here, there it is. That is our shining, glimmering beacon of hope. We've got the gem, we're done with this level, and now there's only one more level we have to backtrack to, and it is substantially easier than what we just did. Oh man, I'm glad that's over. So yeah, let's go ahead and move forward to the easy one. We are going to the jungle rollers. We're getting the very last gem, and then we're going to go ahead and beat up Dr. Cortex and then just roll the credits. All right, we're moving on to the easy one. We're going to have fun. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, instantly whenever you are looking at this level, you should probably be thinking to yourself, you know what, this looks just like the Rolling Stones. And that's because Jungle Rollers is basically just the easier version of the Rolling Stones. Like, everything about it is remarkably similar, the enemies, the hazards, all that good stuff. And even the alternate pathway that got opened up by having the colorful gem that we need for this level, yeah, it's pretty similar as well. Basically the only difference is instead of like in the Rolling Stones, whenever the platform took us into a pit to get some boxes, this platform on this level is going to rise us up slightly in a stone passageway, and that's where we're going to get a few boxes instead. So yeah, basically the only difference between those two levels is one goes up and one goes down. Still, it's a pretty chill little walk through the woods. We're going to wrap this thing up pretty effortlessly, and things are going to be great because next up, we have drneocortex, which is a pretty decent little final boss battle. I'll save my commentary regarding that boss battle for when it's actually taken place, but yeah, it's a decent little challenge to complete the game. Oh, and I guess just one more thing about the Great Gate before I stop complaining about it. So I just realized that it also ended our deathless streak. We ended up going 4 levels, I think, before we finally died, and yeah, we ended up dying one time on that level. which is a real bummer because I'm very confident that I'm not going to die on this level, which means we could have had a really good little streak going on between all these backtracking levels, but I guess it was just not meant to be. Although I am pretty confident that streak would have ended no matter what once we got to drneocortex, because it's kind of easy to screw that fight up and eventually die to that boss, so yeah, all good things must come to an end, it's all good. And now it is time for the very last bonus level we will need to do for this playthrough. And out of respect for all that we have accomplished so far in this playthrough, this bonus level is not even going to try and kill us. Instead, it's removing anything that could potentially cause us any trouble and just giving us a salute and saying, "Job well done." You go ahead and press on to Dr. Cortex and you go stop him from creating more animal soldiers and doing more animal testing. To which I would say thank you, but since when does a bonus level talk? And then it said, "Hey, stop asking questions, take this gem and go away." And I was like, yeah, okay, later. And alright, that is the Jungle Rollers level. We are done collecting gems, we are done collecting keys, we are done collecting relics. There's only really one more thing to do, and that is to go face off against the final boss. So that very brief level you just saw was the Great Hall. That is why we need all of the gems, because those gems end up creating a walkway. And that walkway takes us all the way to another section of that level that will then unlock the cutscene we get at the very end of the game.
Darn you, Crash Bandicoot!
And now it is time for the final boss battle against drneocortex. Ooh, okay, we're already off to a rough start, but that's okay, we're gonna rebound from that death. Yeah, this is the moment we have been waiting for quite some time, especially when having to backtrack through levels we had already done earlier in the game. It was all just so we could progress to this point, where we would be done with all the tedious stuff and we can just skip right to beating up the bad guy. Now, I end up dying to drneocortex quite a bit before I end up defeating him. And with that being said, I can confidently say he probably is the hardest boss in this game, although hardest is kind of a relative term here. Like, I don't think any of the bosses in Crash Bandicoot are overly difficult, but Cortex did give me a decent amount of trouble. Even though his patterns are super predictable, you still have to react to them in a pretty specific way in order to win. So Dr. Cortex is going to be shooting little orbs of energy at you throughout the entire boss battle. You want to avoid the bluish-purplish ones, and you want to spin and hit the green ones. Bluish-purple ones are going to cause you damage or kill you depending on whether or not you have a mask. I ended up needing a mask, and yeah, it still took me a good amount of effort. Now, the green orbs he shoots at you, those are the ones you want to hit. You will spin them, and the first one will be knocked directly into Cortex, and then after that, typically, whenever you spin and hit the green ones, they're going to be knocked back towards Cortex, but not actually hit him, at least not immediately. So they'll end up hanging in the air right beside or above Cortex, and at that point you need to spin and hit another green orb, and at that point it'll either cause the original orb to increase in size to the point to where it eventually hits Cortex, or it will reflect off of it bouncing into Cortex. So yeah, this boss battle really just comes down to avoiding the purple and blue ones, and then spinning and hitting the green ones. Although very specifically, you do need to spin and hit the green ones. If you just run into the green ones, they will also cause you damage. So yeah, timing is very important there, otherwise you're just going to end up dying anyway. So yeah, this boss kind of requires you to have the best coordination of jumping and spinning out of all the bosses in the game, and that probably causes this one to be the hardest. But even though drneocortex is probably the hardest boss in the game, there's really not too much diversity to how you beat him. He just shoots energy balls at you and you hit the green ones. Not very complicated. Oddly enough, I think his predecessor, Dr. Nitrous Brio, had a lot more variety in his boss battle. Granted, that boss battle may have been easier, but you had a good amount of variety. You had him throwing the green potions that turned into blobs, you had him throwing the purple exploding potions at you as well, and eventually he says, screw it, I'm gonna go ahead and drink my own potions, turn myself into the Hulk, and then try crushing you into the ground. And then you have to completely change your strategy against him. So I think Dr. Nitrous Brio actually had a lot more going on in his boss fight, but having a lot going on doesn't necessarily make it the most difficult thing in the world, and I would say drneocortex is the harder fight. And that purely comes down to reaction time, because at the end of the day, drneocortex is not unpredictable by any means. After all, he's not typically shooting at where you actually are. He is shooting in a set pattern every single time, and it is a pattern that you can memorize. It's just making sure you react to everything within a timely manner. And I believe this is the lowest we have had his health, but, well, unfortunately it does not end up working out for me, and I end up taking one more loss right there. But enough losing to Dr. Neocortex. I have done enough explaining about what this boss battle is. It's time to get serious and actually win this thing. Alright, the very first shooting pattern for Cortex is he's going to shoot once to the right, once to the left, and then he's going to shoot a green energy to the middle. And at that point, you run to the middle, spin, and knock it right back at him for the first bit of damage against him in this boss fight. Then the second phase happens. He's going to shoot directly at you once, shoot off screen once, shoot directly at you again, and then shoot off screen 2 more times. All the off-screen shots eventually come back on screen, and they just have little balls of energy levitating at the very bottom of your feet or right above your head. So you have to time your jumps to avoid the bottom ones and also not jump into the top ones. In the midst of all that, Dr. Neocortex will start shooting some green energies every now and then. Just do your best to try timing your jumps to where you're in front of that green energy so you can spin and hit it. And this time around, you do need to hit 2 different green energies in order to damage Cortex. And then we are on to phase 3, which is the phase we are currently doing on screen. And it's a lot like phase 2, only this time you need to hit 3 green energy balls in order to hit Cortex and then damage him. So basically just do the same thing again, but with a little bit more effort. And then we find ourselves in phase 4, which is the rapid fire phase, and this is where you really want to have your masks. Now in this case, he is targeting you specifically, so run for your life. And whenever you have ran too far left or right, just try to jump to cut back and then do it all over again. Just go ahead and hit 2 green energy balls, and then you're going to damage Cortex, and then you're going into the final phase where everything is a green energy ball, and you only have to hit 1 to finish off the fight. Alright, and we defeated Dr. Neocortex, and we got to see the default cutscene from when you defeat him as the final boss, but as we discussed earlier, that is not the only cutscene for beating the game. There is one more in the Great Hall. In order to get to it though, we need to get every single gem and get both of the keys. And of course, throughout the entire playthrough, we have been doing exactly that, and we have everything we need. Once we enter the Great Hall, we do have the gems that are creating something of a walkway for us. They're spaced out a bit, so you do have to jump between them, but they are there. And since we have every single gem in the game, we can reasonably jump between them and just continue to follow their path all the way to the very end of the Great Hall. And once we are there, well, the final cutscene of the game initiates, and then I'll go ahead and roll the credits and we'll wrap this thing up. And we are just a couple of jumps away, so I'll go ahead and exit here. We'll check out the cutscene, and I'll talk to you again during the credits. So that was the happy ending for Crash's goofy self, but let's check out the endings for the antagonists of the game. So, Papu sold the ruins of the Castle Cortex to a resort developer, and he has since used the proceeds to open up a big and tall shop on the island, so good for you, pal. For Ripperoo, after intense therapy and 8 years of higher education, he became Dr. Roo, and he went on to write a really well-received book, titled Through the Eye of the Vortex, a study of rapid evolution and its consequences. Next up, Koala Kong moved to Hollywood and landed a motion picture deal of universal proportions. Currently, he is working with a speech therapist to improve his diction. Then, Pinstripe moved to Chicago, where he now owns and operates a citywide sanitation company. He is saving up money for his upcoming gubernatorial campaign. Next up, Dr. Nitrous Brio. After the disappearance of his mentor, Dr. Nitrous Brio rediscovered his first love, Pending Bar. So you go from Dr. Brio to Bartender Brio. And lastly, Dr. Neocortex. The world has heard nothing more of Cortex since Crash foiled his plans. But evil geniuses are harder to squash than cockroaches. Very well put, because we know that he wastes absolutely no time and eventually he reappears in the sequel for Crash Bandicoot. So yeah, we got to see Crash get his happy ending. We got to also get an update on all of the antagonists of the game. Papu and Pinstripe go on to be business owners in their own worlds. Ripper Roo becomes Dr. Roo, which is actually a canonical ending because he returns in the second game. And if I remember correctly, he is wearing a graduation cap, implying that he actually did get that higher education. Now, we never see Koala Kong again, but his ending is basically just the koala version of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So good for you, I cannot wait to see the koala version of the Terminator. Or would I rather see the koala version of the Predator? That's a really hard choice. And let's see here, did I miss anybody? Alright, Dr. Nitrous Brio becoming Bartender Brio, which, yeah, that makes sense. That man was killing it with the potions in his boss battle, so I feel like he could sling around some drinks. So, overall, pretty good stuff from everybody. Some enemies ended up getting happy endings, others, well, they get set up for the sequels. And I have to say, the weirdest thing in this game about an evil scientist doing animal testing that turns them into soldiers, and not just soldiers, but humanoid animal soldiers. Yeah, no, the weirdest thing is that due to Pinstripe's ending, it is canonically true that in this universe, they also have a Chicago. I don't know why, but it's kind of hard to picture everyday life and just people going to a Chicago Bears game, and also at the same time, somewhere else on the same planet, we have Crash Bandicoot screwing up the plans of drneocortex. Just an absolutely wild world. But yeah, right now I'm letting the credits roll in the background because I did play this game quite a bit, both this remastered version of it and the original. And now that I am doing videos on Crash Bandicoot, well, it only makes sense to go ahead and let the credits roll so all the people involved in the game's creation get all the credit they deserve, especially considering how much I got to enjoy their work. So as the credits roll in the background, I guess there's really only one question left to ask. After having played through the entirety of Crash Bandicoot, was it fun and entertaining? And this is one of those questions where you kind of have to answer it by just repeating to yourself what the title of the game is. I mean, come on, it is Crash Bandicoot. It is a classic. And after all, back in the day, this guy was basically the mascot for PlayStation. And that was a distinction that was very well earned. Not only was he just a memorable character from a design standpoint, but the game was just remarkably fun to play. And that statement's also true for the sequels it ended up coming up with. Like Crash Bandicoot 2 and Crash Bandicoot 3 were also games I put plenty of hours into. And while it's not nearly as popular as something like, say, Mario Kart, I would say Crash Team Racer is also a really fun game as well. But no, we'll go ahead and just stick to the original Crash Bandicoot for this conversation for right now. And yeah, this was just a remarkably fun game to play back in the day, and I will say Crash Bandicoot is one of those games where the simplicity of it honestly is one of the major parts of its appeal. Like, regardless of how many years pass by, I feel like I could pick up a controller and start playing Crash Bandicoot without even really having to think about it too much. The controls are very simple, and the objectives are, well, pretty easy to understand. It's the kind of thing that made the old Mario games also just universally likable. Like, they're not complicated, you just pick up a controller without really knowing too much about the game, start playing, and have a good time. And in this remastered version, they definitely stayed true to that concept because I got to have a lot of fun without really having to refresh my memory on how exactly to play the game. And getting to play it all over again definitely brought back a lot of great memories for me. Now granted, I also complained a lot about certain levels, but just ignore the complaints a little bit because I would not be playing through a game I did not enjoy. This was a very fun experience for me, and like I said, brought back a lot of memories from back in the day. And I just could not help but think about how I got introduced to Crash to begin with, because I was basically just really, really young at the time. And I remember, back in the glorious days before the internet and co-oping over the internet, we all basically just had to share one TV whenever you played the game. And if you were especially cheap like my family back in the day, you really didn't have multiple controllers or anything like that either. So more often than not, whenever you were playing through a game like this, and you wanted to get your friends involved, you'd be just taking turns. Every time someone died, you rotated the controller to somebody else, and you just kept doing that rotation until you eventually got through the game or you ran out of lives. And as I was playing through this, I just found myself really thinking about those times, and yeah, it was kind of nice just to remember one of the earliest games I remember myself playing. And despite being a single-player game, it was a video game that I was introduced to by getting to play it with my friends like that. And yeah, that was just a really good memory to kind of revisit. And now all these years later, I got to play it one final time, beat it, and now I'm making videos about it. I don't know, something about that's just really, really cool to me. So at this point, I have knocked out the entirety of the remaster of the original Crash Bandicoot. And that leaves me kind of wondering whether or not I want to play through Crash 2 or Crash 3, because both of those are in the same remaster collection, so I definitely could. And I have been considering that the entire time I've been doing this video, and if I'm being completely honest with myself, I don't really feel the need to go ahead and chase after the sequels for one of these videos. I think I would rather move on to start playing something else instead. I do have a bunch of fond memories when it comes to the sequel Crash Bandicoot games as well, but most of my memories come from this original game. So I'm pretty satisfied with just only doing these videos for the original game, or, well, the remaster of the original. But that does not necessarily mean that I won't ever pick up the sequels for this either. It just means right now I don't really want to, but that could easily change at some point down the road. So who knows? Maybe I will eventually get around to those. If I have not already done this, what I intend to do next is to start going through the Resident Evil franchise. What I would like to do is start playing through the remakes of those games, starting off with the remake of Resident Evil 1 that came out sometime during the mid-2000s, and then knock out the remake of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, which came out in, recent years. Oh, and Resident Evil 4, I forgot about that. I think that just happened last year. So yeah, I'd like to do all the remakes 1 through 4, and then maybe start also doing Resident Evil 5, 6, and then 7 and 8. Although that is a pretty big commitment. 8 games was definitely no small task, so we will see if I end up going that far with it. But that's kind of where my mind is for right now, and I think that's what I want to do. At the very least, I know I'm going to be doing the remake of the original Resident Evil, so yeah. I think that's going to be the next set of videos that I put out. Well, the next set of videos besides the Combat League stuff that I have for Mortal Kombat 1. Like, I have enough Mortal Kombat 1 online gameplay to last at least another year. So yeah, I would like to add Resident Evil on top of that. And I think that's exactly why I'm a little bit hesitant to say I'm going to do a bunch of Resident Evil games, because I just recently finished the rebooted portion of the Mortal Kombat franchise, and that's just 4 games, and that took me forever. So saying I'm going to do a bunch more games like Resident Evil, I don't know. I don't really want to mentally commit to saying I'm going to do another franchise just yet, even though I would kind of like to go through that entire franchise. In any case, like I said, the remake of Resident Evil 1 should be the very next playthrough that I do. Although I am considering other things like maybe Dead Rising, but we'll see. But enough about my future plans. For right now, this has been my playthrough of the remaster of Crash Bandicoot. It was absolutely an entertaining and fun game to revisit, and I'm very glad that I finally did that. I'm also really glad that I finally got around to actually, commentating on these videos of my gameplay from, like, forever ago. But in any case, I do hope anyone who finds these videos, I hope they also enjoyed the gameplay, or maybe this brought back some memories for them as well. And if you enjoyed this, maybe check out some of the other stuff I have on the Thor's Entertainment channel. While this is the only game I have played so far that would be rated E for everyone, I do have a bunch of other video game gameplay for stuff like Mortal Kombat and also Batman Arkham Knight. Granted, those Batman Arkham Knight videos were some of my earliest ones and not very good, but hey, they're there. And of course, if everything goes according to plan, like I've been describing throughout most of the credits running at this point, I should have other video game gameplay uploaded onto the channel sometime in the very near future. So perhaps you'll enjoy that as well. But yeah, thank you for checking out the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and maybe I'll see you next time.